Like your picture.
I do. Thank you.
These your paper boys? What are they gonna do for us?
They're gonna save you.
This is a very random video, but have you seen The Paperboy? Today we are revisiting one of Nicole Kidman's most unhinged roles to date. Briefly directed by Lee Daniels, the film follows a journalist who returns to his hometown in Florida to investigate the case of a death row inmate with a troubled past. It features a number of high-profile stars, including Nicole Kidman and John Cusack, who deliver some of the most chaotic and memorable performances of their careers, based on a novel by the same name written by Peter Dexter, which I highly recommend. The book offers a much deeper exploration of the characters and the story, and I'm not sure why Lee Daniels chose to make the movie so short. It barely scratches the surface of the source material, and it actually leaves key moments out. The performances in this movie make this film, if not an enjoyable watch, a memorable one at the least. Set in 1969 in the sweltering, racially charged town of Lately, Florida, the film simmers with an underlying violence and deep-seated prejudice. We are introduced to Anita, played by Macy Gray, as she recounts the night of a murder. Serving as the film's narrator, Anita guides us calmly and with a hint of detachment through the haunting events of that summer. She grounds her narration through Jack, a failed college swimmer who now lives at home with his father and his girlfriend. Anita plays a much bigger role in the film than in the book. In the book, it is Jack who is recounting his memories of his brother and time spent in this small town. The whole movie feels like a really bad memory. You're introduced to Jack, played by Zac Efron, who I think gives an incredibly strong and underrated performance in this film, as a very lost young man searching for purpose. Jack's life takes a turn when his brother Ward comes back and hires him as a driver to help them investigate the wrongful conviction of a man on death row. Ward lives in Miami, a far cry from the claustrophobic and conservative town of Lately. When Jack's brother returns, it's clear that there's a bond between them. However, this bond is not as strong or as simple as Jack assumed. Compared to Jack, Ward comes off as far less optimistic and hopeful about his life, despite being an award-winning journalist. From the scars on his face, it's hard to tell if Ward has been in one too many fights or if he's gotten lucky one too many times. Ward works closely with a man named Yardley, a very polished British journalist. In the novel, the relationship between Ward and Yardley is a lot more developed. They share a kind of yin and yang relationship. Ward is the investigator. He's the one who really digs deep on the facts, while Yardley is the one who shapes and presents these facts to the public for consumption. Together, they strike the perfect balance between fact and fiction, form versus substance. The story is set at a time where newspapers like the Miami Times were seen as the gatekeepers of truth and journalistic integrity. Ward embodies a journalistic ideal, and his character really demonstrates why the truth is never black and white. He's the kind of reporter who believes that with enough research, a story can be told in exactly the way it happened. There's a huge difference between details and the bigger picture. Ward's focus on details often blind him to the broader implications of his story. His actions, although technically correct on paper and the right thing to do, might not be in the public's best interest. The man Ward traveled all this way for is Hilary Van Wetter, and I love his name, Hilary Van Wetter. Like the way they say it,
Mr. Van Wetter,
is honestly the best part of the film. He is a poor and violent man convicted of killing a racist and corrupt sheriff. What makes the story extraordinary isn't that someone finally killed the sheriff, it's that the perpetrator was white. Because of this, his case has attracted attention and resources from the biggest newspaper in the state. The case highlights the complete disregard for justice, the rampant racism in this town, and more importantly, how laws are often bent in favor of those who have power. Hillary's case parallels Ward's experiences as a journalist. On one hand, Ward is expected to be this impartial narrator, yet his stories are often shaped by business interests that only want certain narratives or only want to amplify one side of a story. Hilary Van Wetter, I can't even say his name,
Mr. Van Wetter,
played by John Cusack, has to be one of the most disgusting characters I've seen on screen. You feel like you can actually smell him off screen. The movie shows little interest in investing us in Hillary's innocence. And to be honest, I have never cared about a man less. The longer the movie goes on for, the lower my expectations of Hillary. The bar is beneath hell for him. This is the first time I've seen a movie about a wrongfully convicted man behave as if he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. John Cusack honestly deserved an Oscar for this. He was Hilary Van Wetter to me.
Mr. Van Wetter.
He was this psychopath. And I don't know where he was able to conjure this man from, but I hope it's safely back in its bottle. If disgusting were a person, it would be this character. There is absolutely nothing about this man that's in the public's best interest to know about or learn about. And yes, in theory, everyone deserves a fair trial, but sometimes the ends really do justify the means. Whatever got Hillary in jail, somehow it all worked out in the right way. It also doesn't help that Hillary has little to no interest in his own case. He's like this caged animal that takes pleasure in any interactions outside of his violent little world. With each visit, it becomes increasingly clear, especially to Jack, that Hillary should never be let out on the streets. In the book, the scenes with Hillary are a lot more frequent, and the relationship between Hillary and his love interest, Charlotte, played by Nicole Kidman, is explored a lot more in depth. And this film really feels like it had just enough of a budget for the runtime. Given this cast, I imagine they were maxed out. The highlight of the film are the interactions between Charlotte and Hillary. And this relationship is given equal or sometimes even more importance than the relationship between Jack and his brother, which is really central in the novel. Charlotte, played by Nicole, is this older woman desperate for some type of meaning in her life. She spends her days writing to death row inmates, finding comfort in the fact that at least someone is thinking about her, even if that person is behind bars. Charlotte is the type of person who can see humanity in those that God has long abandoned. And I feel like Nicole Kidman gave such a brave and vulnerable performance. This is more than what we deserve, especially as an actress of her caliber. Seeing her in a role like this, on paper, it does feel like it's beneath her. However, it was a challenge that she took on. You just put everything on the table. And I think what I was so impressed by in terms of the performances in this film is there's no ego. Everyone was just giving it their all. I mean, people were going hard. They were giving these characters more depth than the runtime allowed us to explore. Nicole plays Charlotte with such empathy that it's hard not to root for her. And she has this vibe where you're like, okay, if she can just get through this rough patch, because you feel like she's kind of at the end of this phase of writing to death row inmates. And you're like, okay, just one more. However, that one more ends up killing her. Interactions between Charlotte and Hillary are honestly some of the most memorable I've ever seen. And there's one scene that defies description, and it still leaves me just thinking out loud. I don't know. In the book, the visits become less frequent as Charlotte starts to lose interest. And the reason Charlotte starts to lose interest, I think, it is in part because Hillary really could be released. And also she starts to develop this relationship with Ward's partner, Yardley. And that's not something that's really developed in the film. The less attracted Charlotte is to Hillary, the more determined he is to get out of prison. In the film, Charlotte tolerates him until her patience breaks down. And it's far less violent in the movie than it's implied in the book. Charlotte's relationship with Hillary and Yardley's relationship with Ward serve as the emotional anchors for Jack's character. He's torn between his desire for Charlotte and his resentment towards Yardley, and his brother for making him a third wheel. And so Jack is kind of stuck in the middle. He's really searching for purpose, connection, where he's trying to figure out where he fits in all this. Jack is very much a young man who's lost all interest in the world around him. He still lives with his father, sleeping in his childhood room, surrounded by trophies and memorabilia of a time where the world just felt like his oyster. In the novel, Jack's girlfriend appears a lot later, and I felt like that would have worked better. Introducing the girlfriend takes away Jack's relationship to his father, which was really, really central in the book. So much of the story is about Jack navigating his strained relationship with his dad and how Ward's absence leaves the family struggling to decide what's worth holding on to and what it's finally time to let go of. His father has been waiting for his eldest son to return, while Jack has been waiting for his brother to tell him what to do. Jack has no idea what he wants to do with his life. He pursued swimming not out of passion, but because it was something that he was very good at. Hillary's case becomes a way for Jack to explore his feelings about himself, his brother, and this town he no longer wants to call home. What makes Hillary's case so compelling is the very question of why anyone should care. News is driven by stories that people want to pay attention to. And I think that's why Anita is given a much bigger role in the film. Stacey Gray gives, honestly, such a gem of a performance. She's a fantastic actress that deserves a lot more. She plays this housemaid who's constantly dealing with racist microaggressions from Jack's father and his girlfriend. And the world is clearly changing, but not fast enough to affect Anita's day-to-day life, but maybe too fast for people like Jack's father and his girlfriend, who can feel their place in the world slipping away. Ward and Yardley's presence in Lately really stirs up a lot of emotions that have been bubbling beneath the surface. Jack's father owns a local newspaper. There's a strong sense in this town that everyone is used to censoring or redacting any information that might draw unwanted attention to the place. Even though Ward's father is not responsible for his son's actions, this story could end up really hurting him. On paper, what Ward and Yardley are doing seem very admirable. Hillary's freedom could either unravel the fragile order in this town or nip any future problems in the bud. It really depends on how this story is written and framed. The film doesn't delve as deeply into Hillary's case as the novel. In the book, there are frequent visits to Hillary's uncle in the swamp, this place that feels both unlivable but also extremely vulnerable to destruction. These swamp people are a lot smarter than they appear, and because we don't spend that much time with them, we don't really get that sense. Once Hillary is incarcerated, the family pretty much abandons him. In the novel, they're described as a very loyal clan. However, outside of their jurisdiction, which is the swamp, you're pretty much on your own. It isn't until Ward arrives that it occurs to Hillary's family that Hillary could really be released, and you're not sure if they see this as a hopeful prospect or a threat. In terms of setting, we never really spend much time outside of Lately or the swamp, which makes a place like Miami seem like a very altruistic place filled with well-intentioned people who only want to report on the truth and not the soul-sucking pit it really is. Places like Lately and people like Hillary make for really compelling stories for those living in cities like Miami, New York. That's why the contrast between Ward and Yardley works so well. Yardley is determined to get a story, if not about Hillary, then at least about this deranged woman who loves to write to serial killers and death row inmates. He sees people and he sees writing stories as an opportunity to sell himself rather than as an opportunity to approach subjects of intimacy by giving them more depth or drawing the public's attention to something urgent with genuine care. Ward, on the other hand, is very much focused on the details, and he believes if he can just get it right, he very much believes that the details shape the commentary, whatever that commentary may be. The kind of commentary Ward is looking for does not require a dramatic outcome like Hillary's release. However, it does for his newspaper if they want to win awards. In addition, both journalists have to contend with time. The longer the story takes to write, the more their presence in the public eye starts to fade. Something Yardley in particular is very sensitive to. Hillary's case is the perfect representation of the potential of journalism to uncover hidden truths and its destructive ability to rewrite and erase them. Hillary's case offers people like Yardley and those living in New York and Miami really nothing to latch onto. There are no likable characters. The victim is not ideal. In fact, he deserved it. And this leaves Yardley in the position to try and come up with his own story, one that's a lot more compelling. It's one thing to distort how the public understands the truth, but a totally different thing to deceive your writing partner and associates. And it's when Yardley starts to mess with Ward's perception of what happened with Hillary that you start to really see why journalists, not just journalists, should always be subject to scrutiny regarding their motivation and what they stand to gain from a situation. Nothing is ever neutral and no one is ever objective. We once placed a lot of blind faith in these institutions, but over time this trust has eroded, and for good reason. I think Yardley's character in the film is a lot more interesting than in the book. When we first meet Yardley, he's this very confident and well-spoken journalist. I mean, he appears to be afraid of absolutely nothing and no one. He's also a black man trying to navigate a very hostile environment that's unwelcoming to him and everything he represents. His presence adds a very unique layer to this town. If you're Yardley, Why on earth would you care about someone like Hillary or a town like Lately? And I think Yardley masks his personal judgment very well, but it surfaces in his writing, not in the sensationalism, but the subtle absence of genuine care. One that is fully emphasized when we later find out Yardley's accent is fake. And this had to be one of the most jaw-dropping moments. Like, I was speechless. I literally did not know what to say because it comes out of nowhere and you don't really know how to feel. And I think why it was so unexpected is because we had come to believe Yardley to be exactly as he presented himself to be. He comes off as very polished, composed, and seemingly authentic. And so when it's revealed that his persona is just a front to get ahead, it's shocking, but it's not offensive. And I feel like it's less of a betrayal and more of a reminder of just how easily appearances can be crafted and how in the process the truth can be lost in narrative. Charlotte is the only character that presents herself exactly as she is, which makes her an ideal center for a love triangle. She's caught between Jack, this lost boy, Hillary, a psychopath hiding in plain sight, and Yardley, a charlatan with credentials. Jack's mother left him when he was a small child, and this has pretty much left him detached and uninterested in the world around him. And when Charlotte arrives, he takes on two personalities. On one hand, he lusts after her, and on the other hand, he wants to protect her like a father. With Jack, Charlotte has this sense of control and safety. One of the most awkwardly terrifying moments in the film is when Hillary is suddenly released from prison. And it feels very sudden. He's pardoned in part because he's a white man gaining media traction, and the same would not be true for anyone else. And I think that's what makes Hillary's character so insidious. Despite his disregard for the law, his clear danger to society, he still wields a level of privilege that's hard to swallow. He shows up to Charlotte's home like a starving dog who just survived the apocalypse. He's desperate, he's unhinged. I mean, to be in such close proximity to madness. And I thought watching Charlotte's face fall apart was heartbreaking. Like, this scene, the nuance she brings to Charlotte's character, I think was award-worthy. She's doing her best to put up a front and give Hillary what he wants. However, he's not really adjusting to her needs. In fact, he doesn't really care about her at all. And you can actually see her getting more and more terrified through that interaction. You can see her mask slipping. She can't even pretend. And in the end, the pain is way more than she can bear, where she's like, I don't want to go with you. Like, she's literally telling him that, but she feels helpless. Charlotte is then forced to pack up and move to the swamp. And I think what I find interesting about Charlotte, especially in comparison to someone like Yardley, Charlotte's facade is not a front. Her dependence on makeup, cute clothes, is not to make up for her lack of personality. It's to actually really emphasize it and bring it out. In the book, we never see Charlotte again. She slowly disappears from view, and her relationship to Jack feels like a distant memory. In the book, Jack is a lot more offended by her relationship to Yardley, where in the movie he's very forgiving and very, very much obsessed with trying to save her. Jack's time is really torn between thinking about Charlotte and trying to keep up with his brother. Both in the book and in the film, Ward's internal world is in constant turmoil. He never feels as stable as he presents himself to be, and this is because he's burdened with the pressures of being a closeted man in the Deep South. And something that really strikes me about Ward is nothing seems to faze him. Nothing scares him. In fact, part of the thrill of being a journalist for him is seeking out the potential for danger. The way we learn about Ward's sexuality is unsettling and extremely violent. After inviting two men to stay the night, he's tied up and beaten nearly to death. What led to this is unclear, but it's strongly implied that Ward has this dark side that goes beyond casual hookups. The incident gives Yardley an opportunity to finally publish this book, get out of town, and advance his career. I wish the film explored more of what happens after Ward recovers and what happens when he goes back to Miami. The fact that we never go back to Miami is a huge letdown, especially if you read the book. The return is crucial for framing the story and shaping our perspective on how the narrative is reported and presented to the public. Ward's injuries from the incident are extensive, and the film never really conveys their severity or how it nearly obliterates his career and relationship to Yardley. Ward instinctively knows that Yardley lied about parts of the story in order to get it published, and yet he continues to to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's what's so strange about the news. We often suspend what we know about human nature, and our instinct is to trust what we read and what we see and not really to question it. And the same instincts applies to the people writing these stories. We want to believe that their hearts are in the right places, but that's not always the case. The film ends with a hurricane, both emotionally and literally, as all this pent-up frustrations finally erupt when Jack forces Ward to go back to the swamp to find Charlotte. And the ending greatly differs from the novel. In the book, Ward and Jack return, but they never actually see Charlotte, and they leave the swamp alive. We are then told that Ward later dies of mysterious circumstances, with suicide strongly implied. In some ways, I prefer the film's ending to the book. Jack arrives almost in the nick of time to save Charlotte, but he's too late. The scene focuses more on Jack's feelings towards Hillary instead of Ward's investigation of him. Ward's very detached approach to storytelling has left him desensitized and blind to the real dangers these people he's writing about pose. I think that's why Jack's seething hatred feels so justified. Jack is the only person that really conveys human emotion outside of Charlotte. His reaction to things makes sense as an outsider looking in. At the end of the day, these stories affect real people and they have real consequences, and it's hard to be objective when everybody's impacted in different ways. The person writing the story doesn't really have to live with the consequences of what happens after it's written. Jack spent the entirety of this film, and even in the book, trusting his brother, trusting this process his brother has so much faith in. And now that everything's said and done, he's kind of left wondering what was the point. The ending felt more like an implosion than an explosion. Each character was a ticking time bomb, and they finally unraveled in the most devastating way. Once Hillary kills Ward, Jack is left to navigate the swamp on his own, and although he's a fantastic swimmer, he has a very poor sense of direction. And the film frequently weaves in Jack's time as a swimmer to really remind us that Jack has, up until now, Jack has always operated either out of necessity or survival, never any joy. Jack barely survives Hillary's relentless search of him, and in the end, he's forced to find his own way out, not just out of the swamp, but out of lately. In the end, we are told that he became a writer with some renown, stepping into and expanding the family business with a better understanding and appreciation of how stories can not only shape your world, but potentially destroy it as well. Overall, this is such a memorable film. I often think about John Cusack and Nicole Kidman's performance, and I think about them in a way that I don't know if it's a nightmare. I don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing, but I think the book is such a wonderful complement to the film. It offers such a wonderful commentary on the state of journalism today and the dangerous anonymity of its writers and publishers. Ward spent a lot of time looking for signs and patterns, but he was too afraid to confront the reality itself, which is why he failed to grasp the true danger of what Hillary represented. The truth isn't always about getting every single detail right. It's more about the bigger picture, which in this case is how these details come together to create a vision of our world that either deepens our understanding of it or stirs our fears. Both characters overlook inconvenient truths that would require them to take on more power than what should be ethically possible. And I think we often forget about the concept of human error. People like Yardley have no problems taking on this power, shaping narratives in a way that highlight their own skill and their own ego. Others like Ward really can't stomach the idea of withholding information or gatekeeping the truth. And I think both characters demonstrate the need for vigilance from audiences and from readers. Regardless of the facts, we know that certain stories are amplified and others are not because of truth, but because of who controls the narrative. What's allowed to become famous, win awards, or receive funding for investigations really highlights the urgency for greater scrutiny, transparency, and accountability regarding journalism and storytelling. And so I highly recommend this film. If you have not seen the movie, read the book. Watching this movie actually made me want to read the book because I think a lot of the questions about journalism is wonderfully fleshed out in this story. And so if you've seen it, let me know, and until next time.